Obese girl sold like cattle. Mountain man bought her and
What are you
said,
saying? I don't
"Your
understand.
body is so stunning." The afternoon sun beat mercilessly on the wooden platform in Dusty Creek's town square, turning the rough planks into griddles beneath Clara's bare feet. She stood there, trembling, her worn calico dress clinging to her curves as sweat traced paths down her round face. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the gathered crowd, each word a nail driven into her dignity. Her father, Jedediah, slouched against a post 20 feet away, whiskey bottle dangling from his fingers, unable to meet her eyes. "Do I hear $50 for this hardy girl?" the auctioneer called. "Strong back, good for labor." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A woman in a green bonnet whispered behind her gloved hand, her eyes crawling over Clara with undisguised contempt. Two ranch hands near the front made pig noises, slapping their thighs. Clara's cheeks burned. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the platform and into the earth itself. The church bell tolled 3 times, marking time as surely as it marked her humiliation. $30? The auctioneer's enthusiasm waned. "Come now, gentlemen." More snickers. Someone threw a pebble that bounced near her feet. Clara flinched, wrapping her arms around herself. The dust swirled in the hot wind, coating her lips with grit that tasted like shame. Then the crowd parted. A man walked through them, his boots striking the packed earth with purposeful thuds. He was tall, powerfully built, with shoulders that strained against his worn shirt. His dark hair fell past his collar, and a close-trimmed beard framed a strong jaw. But it was his eyes that stopped Clara's breath, gray as storm clouds, fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He climbed the platform steps, the wood creaking under his weight. The auctioneer started to speak, but the man raised one calloused hand for silence. From his belt he pulled a leather pouch and dropped it on the auction block. Gold coins spilled out, clinking and rolling, catching the sunlight. The crowd gasped. "She's not cattle," the man said, his voice deep and quiet but carrying to every corner. "And her body is stunning." The silence that followed was absolute. Clara stared at him, certain she had misheard. But he was looking at her now, those gray eyes steady and sure, and extended his hand, not commanding, asking. "My name is Jax," he said, "and if you'll come with me, I promise you'll never be sold again." Jax's wagon rolled out of Dusty Creek as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Clara sat rigid on the bench beside him, her hands clenched in her lap, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid that any moment he would realize his mistake and turn back. The town fell away behind them, its sounds fading into the vast silence of the frontier. Before them, the Red Rock Mountains rose like ancient sentinels. For the first hour, neither spoke. Jax drove the team with easy competence, his hands light on the reins. Clara studied him from the corner of her eye, trying to understand what kind of man would do what he had done. His profile was carved from granite, strong nose, determined chin, but there was something gentle in the way he murmured to the horses when they balked. The trail wound upward through stands of pine and aspen, the air growing cooler and sweeter with each mile. A creek ran alongside them, its voice a constant companion, and Clara found herself relaxing slightly. Birds sang in the branches overhead. As dusk painted the sky orange and purple, Jax guided the wagon off the trail into a small clearing beside the creek. He set the brake and jumped down, then turned and offered Clara his hand. She hesitated, then took it, feeling the calluses and strength in his palm. Her legs were stiff, and she stumbled slightly. His other hand caught her elbow, steadying her, then released. "Wait here," he said, and began unhitching the horses. Clara stood awkwardly, watching as he worked. She had expected him to order her about, to tell her what to do, but he asked for nothing. When he had the horses watered and hobbled, he built a small fire, then pulled supplies from the wagon bed. Within 20 minutes, coffee was brewing and beans were heating. He cut thick slices from a loaf of bread and handed her one without fanfare. They ate in silence. The bread was fresh, better than anything Clara had tasted in months. Finally, when she had finished, she found her voice. "Why?" The word came out rough, barely more than a whisper. Jax looked at her then, really looked, and Clara saw something in his eyes she couldn't name. Not pity, not lust, something deeper, sadder, older. "Because no one should be sold," he said simply, "and because they were wrong about you." He stood and pulled a canvas tarp from the wagon along with a bedroll. He rigged a small shelter beneath a spreading pine and set the bedroll inside. "This is yours tonight. I'll sleep by the fire." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I brought you to my home, Clara, not to my bed. What you choose to give is yours to give, always. What you choose to keep is yours to keep. Do you understand?" Clara nodded, her throat too tight for words. As he walked back to the fire and settled onto his own blanket, she slipped into the shelter. Through the open side, she watched him add wood to the flames, his face thoughtful in the flickering light. For the first time since her mother's death 3 years ago, Clara felt the hard knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. The Red Rock homestead revealed itself gradually as they crested the final ridge the next morning. Clara's breath caught. Below them, nestled in a valley between towering granite cliffs, a log cabin sat beside a clear stream that widened into a small pond. Aspens clustered around the water's edge, their leaves shimmering silver green in the morning light. Behind the cabin, neat fences enclosed a garden bursting with vegetables, and beyond that, a chicken coop where birds scratched in the dirt. The mountains embraced the valley on 3 sides, their red stone faces glowing in the sun. "It's beautiful," Clara whispered. Jax's mouth curved slightly. "It's home, or it will be, if you'll have it." They descended into the valley, and as they drew closer, Clara saw the care in everything. The cabin's logs were chinked perfectly, the roof solid, the windows fitted with real glass. A covered porch ran along the front, with 2 chairs positioned to catch the morning sun. Wildflowers grew in profusion along the path, columbine, lupine, and Indian paintbrush creating splashes of blue, purple, and red, and Jax helped her down and carried her small bundle inside. The cabin's interior was a single large room divided by function rather than walls. A stone fireplace dominated one end, with a proper iron stove for cooking. A wooden table and 4 chairs occupied the center. Against the far wall stood a bed with a patchwork quilt, and beside it a curtain that could be drawn for privacy. Everything was clean, orderly, and solid. "The bed is yours," Jax said. "I'll sleep in the loft." He pointed to a ladder leading to a platform beneath the peaked roof. "There's a spring house out back, and the creek has good water. Rest first. The journey was hard." Clara wanted to protest, but exhaustion made her sway on her feet. She nodded and sank onto the bed. Jax pulled the curtain closed, and she heard him moving about the cabin, quiet domestic sound somehow more comforting than any words. Within minutes, she was asleep. Days became weeks, and weeks became a rhythm Clara had never known. She woke each morning to find Jax already up, the stove lit and coffee brewing. He would nod good morning, pour her a cup, and head outside. She began making breakfast. First simple porridge, then biscuits, eventually graduating to flapjacks with wild berry syrup. When he came in to eat, he always thanked her, his gray eyes crinkling at the corners. After breakfast, they worked. Jax taught her the rhythms of the homestead with patient demonstration. How to scatter feed for the chickens and collect eggs without startling the hens. How to tell when the garden needed water. How to milk the goat, her hands clumsy at first until she found the right pressure. How to churn butter, gather wild herbs, and hang laundry. Each task she mastered brought quiet satisfaction. She learned Jax's routines, too. He rose before dawn and spent the first hour checking the property's perimeter. He was vigilant about maintenance, fixing small problems before they became large ones. He spoke little, but his actions were eloquent. When she struggled to lift a heavy bucket, he simply took it without making her feel weak. When she burned biscuits, he ate them anyway, commenting only that they had character. One evening, they worked together in the garden pulling weeds. Their hands met over the same stubborn dandelion root. Both paused. Clara looked up to find Jax watching her, something in his expression making her heart stumble. Not hunger, not possession, but something warmer, recognition, as if he saw not just her body, but her, the person inside who laughed at his dry jokes and remembered how he liked his coffee. "You have dirt on your nose," he said softly, and reached out to brush it away. His fingertip lingered for just a moment on her cheek. Clara's breath caught. In that touch was everything he never said, and she understood that Jax, too, carried wounds, deeper than scarred flesh, carved into his soul by whatever he had witnessed in his years as an Army scout. They were helping each other heal, two broken pieces finding unexpected fit. The homestead became their shared world. In the afternoons, when the heat grew intense, they would rest on the porch. Jax carved delicate wooden birds while Clara mended clothes or shelled peas. Sometimes he read aloud from old Shakespeare's sonnets, his deep voice transforming the words into something almost holy. She loved those moments, the sound of his voice mixing with the creek's babble and the wind in the aspens. One morning, Clara stood at the stove, flipping flapjacks, when Jax came in from his morning rounds earlier than usual. His face was serious. "We might have visitors soon," he said quietly. "I found fresh tracks on the eastern trail, multiple horses." Clara's hand stilled. "Who?" "Don't know yet. Could be nothing. Could be trouble." He met her eyes. "If anyone comes asking about you, let me do the talking." That afternoon, as Clara hung laundry, she noticed Jax checking his rifles, cleaning and loading them with methodical care. The easy peace of their valley suddenly felt fragile, like glass that could shatter at any moment. The rider appeared 2 days later on a blazing afternoon when the heat shimmered off the rocks. Clara was in the garden when she noticed Jax stiffen, his hand moving unconsciously toward the rifle leaning against the porch post. She followed his gaze to see a man on a gray horse picking his way down the trail. Everything about the stranger suggested menace, from the pearl-handled pistols on his hips to the cold set of his mouth beneath a waxed mustache. Silas Croft. Clara knew him immediately, though they had never formally met. He was Dusty Creek's most powerful man, owner of the largest ranch in the territory and the source of her father's debt. Jax moved to stand between Clara and the approaching rider. Croft reined in 10 feet from the porch, not dismounting, using his horse's height to look down on them. His eyes crawled over Clara with the assessment of someone inventorying property, then shifted to Jax. "Jack Stone," Croft said, his voice smooth as snake oil. "Heard you bought yourself a woman at auction. Expensive taste for a hermit." "State your business or ride on," Jax replied flatly. Croft smiled, showing too many teeth. "My business is simple. That girl's father owed me a debt. I was generous enough to allow him to settle it with his daughter. You interfered. There's no law that says a man can sell his child. Frontier law, Stone. We make our own out here." Croft leaned forward in his saddle. "But I'm reasonable. Return the girl, and we'll forget this unpleasantness." Clara felt ice in her veins. She moved to step forward, but Jax's hand came up slightly, not touching her, just signaling. "Wait. The girl has a name. It's Clara, and she stays here." Croft's smile vanished. "You're making a mistake. See, I've done some research. Clara's mother, before she married that drunk Jedediah, owned land south of here. When she died, it passed to her daughter. Land with a year-round creek running through it. Water rights, Stone. Worth a fortune now that the railroad's coming." His eyes flicked to Clara. "I had plans for that land. Still do." Understanding crashed over Clara. He had never wanted her as property. He wanted her land, the land her mother had protected so carefully, making sure the deed stayed in Clara's name. "The land's not for sale," Clara heard herself say. Croft finally looked directly at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her step closer to Jax. "Everything's for sale, girl. Question is just price." He straightened. 3 days. That's how long you have to reconsider. After that, I come back with the marshal and proper paperwork. Your father will sign over your inheritance to settle his debts. Better to deal with me directly." He wheeled his horse and rode back up the trail. Clara watched until he disappeared, her hands clenched so tight, her nails cut into her palms. "He can't do that," Clara said, hating how her voice shook. "Can he?" Jax was silent for a long moment. "On the frontier, men like Croft make the law. He probably owns the marshal. If your father signs—" That evening, they sat on the porch as darkness gathered. Jax had been quiet through dinner, his food barely touched. Finally, he turned to her. "I can take you away from here, tonight, north into Montana territory. Start over where Croft's reach doesn't extend." Clara looked at the cabin, the garden, the mountains she had come to love. This place had given her back herself. The thought of fleeing made something hot and fierce kindle in her chest. "No," she said, "I'm tired of running. My mother fought to keep that land in my name. I won't dishonor her by giving up." Jax studied her face, and slowly that almost smile touched his lips. "Then we fight, but it won't be easy." He reached over and took her hand. They sat like that as stars emerged overhead, 2 people preparing to defend what they had built. The attack came on the second night when the moon was dark. Clara woke to Jax's hand over her mouth, his whisper, urgent. "Men outside, stay down." Through the window, she could see shapes moving, at least 4 men approaching from different angles. One carried a torch. Jax moved with deadly efficiency, checking weapons. His face was transformed, no longer the gentle homesteader, but the soldier he had been. "Get in the root cellar," he said, utterly calm. "Stay there until I come for you." "Jax." "Now, Clara." She descended into the cramped cellar beneath the cabin floor, pulling the trapdoor closed but leaving it slightly ajar. The darkness smelled of earth and stored vegetables. Croft's voice rang out, "Stone, send out the girl, and your cabin stays standing." Jax's response was a rifle shot that sent the torch-bearer diving for cover. "Next one goes through bone." Gunfire erupted. Clara pressed her hands over her ears but couldn't block out the violence. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Then she heard Jax grunt, a sound of pain, and everything in her went cold. She pushed up the trapdoor and saw him slumped against the wall near the door, blood spreading across his shoulder. He was trying to reload one-handed, his face pale. Clara didn't think. She grabbed the shotgun and fired both barrels through the shattered window. The recoil nearly knocked her down, but she heard a scream outside. In the momentary silence, she reloaded and fired again. "There's two of them!" someone yelled. Jax stared at her, shock and pride warring on his face. "Clara, tell me what to do," she said steadily, despite her shaking hands. Together, they held the cabin. Jax directed her fire while working to staunch his bleeding. The wound was deep, but hadn't hit bone. He would live if they survived. Clara discovered she had steady aim when properly motivated. As dawn grayed the sky, the shooting stopped. Croft's men had retreated to the ridge. Clara sagged against the wall. Jax tried to stand and nearly fell. She caught him, taking his weight, and helped him to a chair. "We need help," she said, looking at his pale face. "No time. They'll regroup." He grimaced. "Clara, I'm sorry." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "You gave me a home. Now let me fight for it." An idea formed, wild and dangerous. The deeds to her land would be at Croft's ranch. If she could get them, prove her ownership, she could ride to the next town where Croft didn't control the law. She told Jax her plan, and though he protested weakly, he was too injured to stop her. Before he could argue further, she was moving, gathering supplies, saddling a horse, strapping on a pistol. Jax tried to stand, but was too weak. "Clara, please." She looked down at him and smiled. "You told me I was stunning. Time I believed it." She rode out, heading straight toward danger, leaving Jax with a loaded rifle and a prayer. The ride to Croft's ranch took Clara through unfamiliar territory, but she followed landmarks Jax had mentioned. Every minute away from him felt like physical pain, but determination burned hotter than fear. Most of Croft's men would be regrouping for another assault. She had a narrow window. The Lazy Sea Ranch sprawled across a valley, the main house built from imported timber and whitewashed to gleaming. Clara circled wide, approaching from the back where cottonwoods offered cover. She tied her horse and proceeded on foot. The kitchen door was unlocked, the arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. Clara slipped inside, moving through rooms decorated with expensive furniture. The study was on the second floor. Behind the desk, in a locked cabinet, she found the deeds, including her mother's land grant, with her name clearly written. She was shoving documents into her shirt when footsteps sounded in the hallway. Clara froze, pressed against the wall. A ranch hand walked past, whistling, oblivious. She waited, then moved. Getting out was harder. Two men lounged on the front porch. Clara retraced her steps to a window opening onto a second-floor balcony. The drop was 15 feet. She lowered herself over the railing, hung at full extension, then let go. The impact jarred her bones, but she rolled and came up running. Shouts erupted. She had been seen. Clara sprinted for the trees, legs pumping, lungs burning, expecting a bullet. She reached the cottonwoods as gunfire split the air, bark exploding inches from her head. Her horse was dancing in fear, but she grabbed the reins, hauled herself into the saddle, and kicked hard. The pursuit howled behind her. Clara had never been a confident rider, but desperation lent skill. She gave the horse its head, trusting its instincts. Twice she nearly fell. Once she guided the horse through a rocky defile, hooves striking sparks from stone. She burst into the homestead valley as the sun reached its zenith. Jax was on the porch, somehow on his feet despite his wound, rifle ready. When he saw her, saw the men behind her, his face went hard. Clara thundered past the cabin and wheeled behind the garden wall. Jax opened fire. The pursuing riders pulled up short, caught between Jax's position and Clara now firing from behind them. Croft sat his horse at the edge of rifle range, his face purple with rage. The standoff held for long minutes. Then riders appeared on the ridge. Not Croft's men. These wore badges. The marshal from Silver City, 2 counties over, along with a federal land agent and 3 deputies. Clara had sent a telegraph from Dusty Creek before leaving with Jax, a desperate plea to investigate Croft's land claims. They had finally arrived. Croft's men scattered as the federal officers descended. The rancher tried to brazen it out, but Clara climbed from cover and held up the deeds. When the land agent examined them and confirmed her ownership, Croft's face went gray. They arrested him there in the valley. The federal marshal, a weathered man named Brennan, studied Jax's wound and Clara's exhausted face with respect. "You two have backbone," he said. "We've been building a case against Croft for months. These documents are exactly what we needed. The land is legally yours, Miss Clara. Always was." After they led Croft away, Clara stumbled to where Jax stood, leaning against the porch rail, his face ashen. She wanted to say something profound, but all that came out was, "You're bleeding again." He laughed, actual laughter, and nearly collapsed. Clara caught him, and together they made it inside. She cleaned and rebandaged his wound, her hand steady despite the adrenaline still singing in her blood. When she finished, Jax caught her wrist gently. "You rode into a den of wolves and came out victorious," he said quietly. "You are the bravest person I've ever known." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I learned from you." "Clara." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "That first day when I said your body was stunning, I meant it. Not just your physical form. Your courage, your kindness, the strength you carried even when the world tried to break you. You are stunning in every way that matters." He hesitated. "And I love you, if you'll have me." The words unlocked something in Clara's chest. She leaned forward and kissed him, gentle at first, then deeper as his good arm came around her. It was a kiss that tasted of smoke and survival, of 2 people who had walked through fire and emerged transformed. Outside, the valley lay peaceful. The chickens returned to their scratching. The creek burbled its eternal song. The red rocks glowed like beacons, marking the boundaries of their small kingdom. 3 weeks later, the circuit preacher married them on the porch with the mountains as witnesses. Word had spread about the woman who faced down Silas Croft, and cautiously others began to treat Clara with respect. Jax's shoulder healed, though it would ache with rain. Clara's land, when they visited it, proved as valuable as Croft had believed, but they leased the water rights to a cooperative of small ranchers, ensuring no one else could accumulate such dangerous power. One evening, in early autumn, they sat on the porch, watching the aspen leaves turn gold. Jax carved a small cradle, pretending it was just another project. The sun set behind the mountains, painting everything amber and rose. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked quietly. "Buying me that day?" Jack set down his carving and took her hand. "Every good thing in my life started that day. No regrets." Above them, the first stars emerged. Tomorrow would bring its own work and challenges, hard winters, difficult seasons. But they had learned they were stronger together. That home was not a place, but the courage to stand for what mattered. As darkness settled, a rider appeared on the distant ridge, just a silhouette against the dying light, watching. Then it turned and disappeared. Clara felt Jack's tense beside her. "One of Croft's men?" she asked. "Maybe. Or someone else interested in water rights now that word spread." His hand tightened on hers. "The fight isn't over, Clara. Men like Croft have friends, and grudges run deep out here." Clara looked at the cabin, at the life they had built, at the man beside her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "Let them come," she said softly. "We'll be ready." Jax pulled her close as the last light faded from the sky. In the cabin behind them, the lamp burned warm and steady, a beacon in the gathering dark.